The air inside the sci-fi training dome was dry, filtered, and humming with the low frequency of a dozen alien species attempting not to offend one another. The ceiling, a smooth shell of translucent composite, let filtered light pour over the sparring circle at the center. Human and alien cadets from across the Galactic Exchange Program stood in clusters, some adjusting their gear, others observing the schedule screen flickering above the arena. On that screen, in blocky red Terran script, the next match was listed. Elias Norman, human, versus Rahzin, Vurak. A murmur passed through the crowd. Rahzin was nearly 8 feet tall, a V-shaped tank of muscle and sinew, with a reputation for unrelenting aggression. He'd already put 2 cadets in recovery stasis over the past month alone. Across the floor, Elias Norman stretched his arms slowly, jaw clenched, focus razor-sharp. Elias wasn't the tallest in the program, nor the fastest, but he had something else. A stubbornness that bordered on pathological and a steel-threaded calm that unnerved even the more warlike species. "Are you sure about this?" asked Instructor Hylan, a Zerati with eyes like polished obsidian. She tapped her claw against the datapad. "You could request a delay." "Rahzin is already cleared," Elias said, rolling his shoulder back. "And I've watched Rahzin fight. He overcommits when he thinks he's already won." Hylan tilted her head. "You're not wrong, but he usually is right." Elias gave a short nod, then stepped toward the sparring circle. The floor shimmered blue as he crossed the boundary, sensors activating to record vitals, motion, and impact. Rahzin stood waiting, arms folded, expression unreadable. The Vurak's skin was a dull green, covered in patches of natural armor that flexed with his movement. "You are not big," Rahzin said. "Neither is a bullet," Elias replied. The alien crowd murmured again. Tones sounded. The match began. Rahzin moved first, a forward lunge that Elias barely dodged. The human ducked left, twisted, and delivered a sharp elbow to Rahzin's side. It echoed like hitting a sandbag. Rahzin didn't flinch. Instead, he grabbed Elias by the torso and hurled him across the circle. Elias hit the padded mat hard, something popping in his left shoulder as he rolled. He came to a stop on one knee, face contorted in pain. A few alien students gasped. One of the sci-fi med techs at the edge of the circle stepped forward, but Elias raised his right hand. "Don't. Not yet." He stood slowly, left arm dangling. His breath was shallow, teeth clenched as he looked at his limp shoulder, then at Rahzin, who looked confused. "You are broken," Rahzin said. "Dislocated," Elias replied through gritted teeth. He backed up to the edge of the circle, then knelt. The crowd leaned in. A Zephyr student covered her eyes with her hand. A Grell technician whispered, "He's not going to." Elias braced his left hand against his knee, took a deep breath, then gripped his left elbow with his right hand. With a quick, brutal motion, he pulled and rotated. There was a wet pop and an audible groan from the human. He exhaled shakily, then tested the arm. It moved. Not well, but enough. "Okay," he muttered, getting back to his feet. "Let's go." Rahzin hesitated uncharacteristically. "You were injured." "I noticed." "You should stop." "I said let's go." The tone sounded again, signaling the continuation of the match. This time, Elias didn't wait. He dashed forward, dipped low, and slid under Rahzin's sweeping arm. With his right hand, he jabbed upward into the soft gap beneath Rahzin's ribs. The alien grunted and staggered back. Elias followed up with a leg sweep that brought the Vurak crashing down. The crowd erupted. Even Instructor Hylan leaned forward, visibly impressed. Rahzin tried to rise, but Elias was already on his back, locking his right arm around the Vurak's throat. His left arm trembled but held steady enough to brace against Rahzin's shoulder. The larger alien thrashed, but Elias adjusted his weight expertly, keeping the pressure on. Seconds passed. Then Rahzin tapped the mat. The match ended. Elias crawled off, breathing hard. He didn't celebrate. He simply sat down against the wall, cradling his left shoulder. A sci-fi med tech approached with a scanner. "You should not have continued. You risked nerve damage." "I know," Elias said. "But I had to finish it." Alien students surrounded the circle, whispering in their own languages. Some glanced at him in awe, others in confusion, a few in what looked to be discomfort. Later, in the infirmary, Elias sat shirtless on the edge of a med table while the technician wrapped an ice pack around his shoulder. The scanner confirmed the dislocation, but no tears or fractures. You'll need to immobilize it for a few days, the med tech said. No combat training for at least a week. Maybe 10 days. Got it. The door opened and Instructor Hyland entered. You know, she said, handing him a folded training shirt, when I told the class that humans were adaptive, I didn't mean you had to demonstrate it like that. Elias shrugged with his good shoulder. Couldn't let Rahzin think he had me? She studied him for a moment longer. You've earned a lot of respect today. But don't mistake that for invincibility. I don't. She nodded and left. Out in the corridor, alien cadets still lingered. A pair of young Vurak students stepped aside when he passed, wide-eyed. A Draven with shimmering blue skin asked him something in halting English. You really pushed your shoulder back in? I did. Does it hurt? Elias stopped walking. Yeah, it hurts a lot. The Draven blinked, then nodded solemnly. Over the next few days, Elias followed the med tech's instructions to the letter. No combat. Ice every few hours. Sleep upright. He even skipped a field sim to avoid range injury. The joint ached constantly, but the swelling went down, and by day 6 he had partial movement again. Rahzin approached him at lunch on the 7th day. The cafeteria was quieter than usual. You are better? Getting there. You fought well. Elias looked up. Thanks. Rahzin hesitated, then sat across from him. I thought you were broken. I do not understand how you continued. Neither did I until I had to. Rahzin seemed to think about that. Vurak are taught that injury is defeat. Humans are taught that sometimes it's just part of the process. There was a long pause. Then Rahzin nodded slowly. Later that week, during a lecture on interspecies resilience, Instructor Hyland brought up footage from the match. She didn't point out Elias by name, but the clip of him resetting his shoulder played on loop. This, she said, is what humans call pain tolerance. It is not invincibility. It is not recklessness. It is a calculated risk taken by a trained individual. Understand the difference. Elias sat in the back, left arm still in a sling, trying not to smile. Outside the lecture hall, a sci-fi student named Trava caught up to him. You're a lunatic, you know that? She said. So I've heard. I mean, I once saw a Krellic engineer faint from a stubbed toe, and you just popped your arm back in like it was a Lego piece. It wasn't pleasant. Yeah, well, you've officially become a case study in half the psych modules. Great, Elias thought. Just what I wanted. But as the days passed, the whispers turned into questions. Not about the fight, but about how he endured it. How he knew what to do. Why he didn't panic. And Elias found himself, reluctantly, explaining the same thing over and over. You just deal with the pain. Sometimes that's all you can do. By the end of the month, Elias was back in light training. Shoulder stiff but functional. He watched a new match from the stands. This one between a Yeleni and a Crescent. Both fought with elegance and precision, but something was off. The Crescent hesitated after a hard impact to the leg, then backed away, waving to end the match. Elias leaned over to Trava. What happened? She tweaked her knee. Probably nothing serious. He nodded. Still, better to stop early than make it worse. Trava raised an eyebrow. You're saying that? He grinned. I learn eventually. She rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. That night, Elias received a message on his terminal. A formal invitation to speak at an interspecies panel on battlefield endurance. He stared at the glowing text for a moment, then sighed. Guess I'm the expert on dumb decisions now. He accepted the invitation anyway. The dull, rhythmic buzz of the hydrotherapy unit echoed through the med bay, followed by a faint hiss as cold water circulated through the compression sleeve wrapped around Elias's shoulder. He sat on the edge of a narrow bench, bare feet resting on the floor's rubberized surface, his gaze fixed on the gradually dimming wall display. The automated physiotherapy program ticked down the final seconds of the session, and with a soft chime, the pressure relaxed. Session complete, announced the med unit in a gender-neutral sci-fi dialect. Mobility at 73%. Pain index, moderate. Still feels like a door hinge made of gravel, Elias muttered. A tall figure stepped into the bay, the soft clack of hooves echoing off the walls as it approached. The creature's elongated neck curved slightly, silver-blue skin pulsing with shifting bands of light. Trava, now in her off-duty robes, held a slim data paddle and a wrapped bundle under one arm. "You're not cleared for sparring yet," she said, tapping the paddle against her palm. "Not planning on it," Elias replied. "I just like the sensation of my nerves screaming." You do realize sarcasm is harder to detect when your species has no bioluminescent indicators, right? My condolences to your people. She set the bundle down beside him on the bench. "I brought you something. It's not edible, so you're safe." He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small sculpture about the size of a hand carved from a pale amber resin. It depicted a humanoid figure locked in a wrestling hold with a much larger creature, their limbs tangled in a dynamic twist of motion. Elias tilted it slightly to catch the light. "It's a traditional Quran piece," Trava explained. "Symbol of calculated defiance. Usually gifted to someone who survives a confrontation they had no business winning. I'll try not to let that go to my head. You already walk like you've got a gravitational field centered on your ego. I think that's just the sling." She sat across from him, watching as he rotated his shoulder slightly, testing the limits of the joint. "You should know," she said, "they're using your match in cross-discipline seminars now. Not just for resilience studies. Diplomatics, cultural interpretation, even hazard response. I didn't realize dislocating a joint made me a teaching tool. It wasn't just that. You kept control. You made tactical decisions while injured. That's what's baffling to them." "Baffling, huh? Most species with high pain thresholds enter a fugue state under trauma. You didn't. You adapted in real time." Elias shifted slightly. "We don't get to shut down back home. You either adjust or fall behind." Trava studied him for a moment, then changed the subject. "Do you remember that Scrivian cadet from the orientation cycle? The one who wore 3 breath regulators?" "Yeah. Always smelled like boiled seaweed. He collapsed yesterday during endurance training. Dehydration. He's fine now, but it shook the instructors. They've started reassessing the physical baselines for the whole cross-species curriculum." "All because of me?" "Because of the contrast. You pushed through a dislocation. He fainted from fluid loss. It's forcing them to rethink how they measure capacity. Not everyone responds to stress the same way." Elias leaned back slightly, wincing as his shoulder tensed. "That's not a surprise. People forget pain isn't a universal constant. We don't all process injury with your level of indifference. It's not indifference. It's just compartmentalization. You can't let pain take the wheel." Trava tilted her head. "You've done this before. Not exactly this, but close enough." She didn't press. Instead, she stood and motioned toward the diagnostics bay. "They're waiting for your cognitive scan. You're late. I was hoping you'd forget." "Not a chance." Elias followed her down the corridor, the med bay's lights dimming behind them. The diagnostic suite was quieter, with only a low hum from the ceiling vents and the occasional chime from one of the neural mapping stations. A Draven technician with iridescent scales adjusted the headband of a biosensor rig as they entered. "Sit straight," the Draven said, gesturing. "Avoid clenching your jaw. It distorts the readings." Elias sat, letting the technician secure the band around his temples. The screen beside him flickered to life, showing a simplified brainwave pattern in shifting colors. "Begin baseline assessment," the technician said. "Think of a stressful event." Elias closed his eyes. The memory came unbidden: a down transport. Snow whipping past broken glass. A crewmate pinned beneath a twisted bulkhead. The stink of coolant and blood. That same grinding shoulder pain from the last time it had dislocated. He'd fixed it then, too, with a belt and a door frame. The pattern on the screen spiked, then stabilized. "Interesting," the Draven murmured. "You're maintaining cognitive coherence during recall. No dissociation markers." Trava glanced at the screen. "That's rare." "Not unheard of," the technician replied. "But uncommon. Most subjects fragment under traumatic memory recall. He's integrating it." Elias opened his eyes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Depends on whether you believe suppression or integration leads to better function, the Rahzin said. But in your case, it suggests high adaptability under neurophysical stress. Trava folded her arms. You're setting the curve again. Elias seized the headband off and stood. That never helped me in school. Well, here gets you diplomatic invitations. You've been requested for a panel at the Vurak consulate next cycle. Rahzin's people? They want to understand you. Or at least understand how someone your size dismantled one of their rising prospects. Elias sighed. Do I have to wear the robes? They'll expect it. But you can negotiate. Perfect. Nothing says diplomacy like cultural fashion standoffs. Later that evening, he sat alone in the observatory chamber where the ceiling displayed a real-time projection of the stars outside the orbital campus. The room was quiet, save for the software of the environmental systems. He leaned back against the curved seating, his arms supported by a padded wedge. A trio of young Crescent students entered, whispering to each other. They hesitated when they saw him, then approached. Is it true, one asked, that you repositioned your joint without anesthetic? Yes. And you kept fighting? Yes. The tallest of them peered at his shoulder. Does it still hurt? All the time. The smallest Crescent blinked, then asked, Why didn't you stop? Because he hadn't won yet. They exchanged glances, then sat down across from him. No more questions. Just silent, thoughtful presence. Eyes turned upward to the stars. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. By the next rotation, the consulate event was confirmed. Elias was fitted for formal attire, loose robes with ceremonial patterns woven in metallic thread, tailored to his measurements but clearly designed for broader frames. The Vurak assistant who delivered them seemed unsure whether the sleeves looked correct on a human. It'll do, Elias said, adjusting the collar. You will be seated with the secondary delegates, the assistant explained. Not the primary circle. Because I'm not Vurak? Because Rahzin will be presenting. Elias paused. Presenting what? His re-evaluation of failure. When he arrived at the consulate chamber, the room was already half full. Vurak of varying ranks occupied the upper tiers, their ceremonial armor gleaming. Trava waved from a lower bench, seated beside a sci-fi representative. Elias joined her silently. Rahzin entered from the far end, posture rigid, eyes forward. He took the central platform and spoke in fluent Galactic Standard. I believed I understood strength. I believed pain was a limitation. I believed surrender was weakness. Then I fought the human. A murmur spread through the audience. He did not overpower me. He did not outmatch me physically. He adapted faster than I could react. He endured what should have ended the match. And he chose when to stop. He paused, then turned slightly. I have learned that strength is not always force. Sometimes it is refusal. Sometimes it is the decision to continue despite injury, despite fear, despite logic. Elias watched without expression. Rahzin stepped down from the platform. Protocol dictated that he acknowledge any individuals referenced in formal address. He approached Elias and extended a closed fist, a gesture of formal recognition in Vurak culture. Elias returned it. No more words needed. As they exited, Trava nudged him lightly. So, still think you're just a guy with a busted shoulder? Pretty sure that's still accurate. You've shifted diplomatic theory across 5 systems. I did it by accident. That's why it worked. He didn't argue. The stars outside the viewport glittered on, indifferent to their debates. But somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Exchange, a new case file was being compiled, one that began not with policy or strategy, but with a dislocated shoulder and the choice to keep going anyway. The rehabilitation hall smelled faintly of antiseptic and ozone. A broad, low-ceilinged room in the west arc of the exchange campus, it was usually quiet during rest cycles. But this cycle, early into the third quarter rotation, the hall was bustling. Not with patients, only 2 were logged, but with observers. A dozen or so cadets, mostly non-humans, had clustered in the observation gallery, not speaking, just watching through the transparent divider. Elias ignored them as best he could. He sat shirtless at a padded bench, his left arm strapped to a mechanical resistance rig. Thin cables connected the device to a wall console, where an animated skeleton mirrored his movements, highlighting tendons, ligaments, and soft tissue stress in shades of blue and green. "Try internal rotation," said a voice behind him. It was Chief Specialist Ranit, one of the few campus staff with both orthopedic and xenobiological certifications. Ranit's species, the Olkairi, had no joints in the traditional sense, which made his fascination with human musculoskeletal repair either ironic or obsessive. Probably both. Elias rotated his forearm inward. The machine offered calibrated resistance. Pain flickered along his deltoid. He held the position, jaw clenched, then released. "That one's still catching," he said. "Subscapularis adhesion," Ranit replied, checking the readout. "You're compensating with your trapezius. Reset the motion and try again, slower this time." Elias repeated the movement. Slower. Controlled. The pain remained dull and deep, but the range improved by a few degrees. Ranit tapped something into the console and the resistance dropped slightly. "I adjusted the threshold. We'll scale back up during the next cycle." Elias nodded, then flexed his fingers, testing for any radiating numbness. There wasn't any. That was good. Outside the divider, a young Draven leaned closer to the glass. His frilled neck pulsed with soft lavender light. "He's been here every day," Ranit said, following Elias's gaze. "That one watches your sessions like a lecture. Guess I'm educational. You're either going to become a legend or a cautionary tale." Elias stood, rolling his shoulder gently. "Hopefully both." Ranit handed him a flexible band and gestured to the balance platform nearby. "Let's check your proprioception. Left foot forward, eyes closed." Elias stepped onto the platform and closed his eyes. The machine beneath his feet shifted, subtle movements designed to test his equilibrium and muscular awareness. The band in his hands added light resistance as he moved his arm through a controlled arc. "To your left," Ranit instructed. "Don't let the shoulder shrug. Keep the scapula anchored." The band tugged slightly. Elias adjusted. Sweat formed along his brow. 30 seconds passed. Then 60. "Good. Hold. Now extend." 30 degrees. He extended. The joint twinged in protest. His breathing slowed. "Still with me?" Ranit asked. "Yeah." "Describe the pain." "Deep ache. No sharp edges. Stable. 2 out of 10. Not bad. Down from 4 the last time." Elias opened his eyes. "Progress, then." "Measured progress. You're still compensating a little, but the neuromuscular repatterning is happening." "Glad to hear it." Ranit turned away and began inputting data. "You're cleared for low-impact spar simulations starting next cycle. No strikes, no grapples. Just movement drills." "Understood." He stepped off the platform and took a towel from the bench. The crowd beyond the glass hadn't moved. A sci-fi female was sketching something on a thin datasheet, glancing up between strokes. A Crescent cadet appeared to be mimicking Elias's previous arm movement. Ranit noticed them too. "Why do you think they're still watching?" Elias asked. Ranit didn't look up from the console. "Because you didn't just endure pain. You used it. They're not used to that. Most species avoid pain systematically. You adapted your behavior around it. I didn't have a choice. No one ever does. But most still hesitate." Elias dried his face and turned back toward the therapy station. "I need to finish the scapular series. You already passed the threshold for today. Then I'll just go light." Ranit looked at him for a long moment, then gestured toward the cables. "Fine. But one set. No extras." Elias hooked himself into the next station and began the motion arcs, slow and deliberate. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the Draven cadet finally stepping away from the glass. He entered the rehab hall through the main door, stopping a few meters from Elias. "You're not supposed to be in here," Ranit called. The Dravan bowed his head slightly. I asked for clearance. I was approved to observe. Ranit narrowed his eyes. That doesn't mean you can interrupt. I won't. He looked at Elias. Can I ask something? Elias paused mid-rep. Sure. The Dravan stepped closer. His eyes were pale and wide with horizontal pupils that flicked back and forth. When you felt the shoulder tear, he asked, what told you it could be reset? Past experience, Elias said. I've dislocated it before. I recognized the signs: limited abduction, radiating pain but no distal numbness, and the humeral head felt anterior. That meant it hadn't fractured on the way out. The Dravan blinked. But you weren't certain. No, I wasn't. Then why act? Because waiting would have made it worse. The longer it stays out, the more swelling you get. That makes reduction harder. Pain increases and the muscles spasm. I had a small window where I could fix it myself. The Dravan looked at the machine Elias was using. And the pain didn't stop you? It almost did. But I knew what needed to happen. The Dravan nodded slowly, then turned to Ranit. Do you teach human anatomy? I specialize in comparative biomechanics. Human modules are available. I'd like to join the next one. You'll need to pass the baseline physiology pretest. I will. The Dravan left as quietly as he'd arrived. Ranit folded his arms. You're becoming a curriculum trigger. I'm not doing anything special. You're doing what others haven't. That's enough. Later that cycle, Elias sat in the campus atrium, a broad glass dome overlooking the inner gardens. It was twilight on the station's artificial day cycle, and the light from the overhead panels dimmed to a warm amber. Trava approached, carrying 2 drinks in insulated cylinders. Tea, she said, handing one over. It's got something calming in it. Probably harmless. Elias took it. That's not reassuring. She sat beside him on the low bench. I saw the Dravan. He cornered me in the corridor and asked if pain could be taught. What did you tell him? That the sensation can't, but the response can. Which is apparently what you're doing. He took a sip. The drink was earthy and slightly bitter. He's curious. That's a good start. You've created a ripple. Not just among the students. The faculty started reviewing how different species conceptualize resilience. Your name's being brought up in more than a few planning meetings. I didn't come here to be an example. No one does. That's why it matters. They sat in silence for a while, watching the bioluminescent plants shift color as the internal cycle moved toward night. The garden below was quiet, the air circulation making soft patterns in the tall grasses. You know, Trava said, the Crescent have a proverb. The reed that bends teaches more than the stone that stands. What does that mean? That adaptation is more instructive than rigidity. They're using your match with Rahzin as an example of that now. He set the cup down beside him. I didn't bend. I just didn't break. Same thing in the right context. Ranit approached them shortly after, holding a datasheet. You're cleared for full motion drills starting next cycle. No restrictions. Elias raised an eyebrow. Already. You met the benchmarks. Coordination, strength, and nerve feedback are all acceptable. Trava looked at him. So what now? I train. Like everyone else. No more observers? I didn't say that. The next morning, Elias entered the training dome again. The crowd was smaller this time. Just a few cadets watching quietly from the perimeter. He stepped into the simulation rig, sensors attaching to his limbs. The floor shifted, programming a randomized series of movement prompts. He moved through them smoothly. No pain. No hesitation. The shoulder held. After the final sequence, he stepped off the mat and collected his gear. A Crescent instructor approached him. Your metrics suggest optimal reintegration, she said. Would you be willing to assist with a tutorial on biomechanical compensation strategies? Sure, Elias said, slinging the bag over his good shoulder. Just don't ask me to dislocate anything again. The instructor didn't laugh. But she nodded. That was enough. As he walked back through the corridor, a group of new cadets passed him, chattering in a mix of languages. One of them looked at him briefly, then whispered something to the others. The term they used wasn't Galactic Standard, but he caught the gist. It translated roughly to the one who resets. He kept walking. Not faster. Not slower. The shoulder didn't ache anymore. And for the first time in weeks, nobody stopped him. Nobody asked questions. That felt like progress.